Thank you for joining us today. As many of you know, tomorrow marks 1 year since the first confirmed case of COVID-19 was detected in Montana. Today I'll give you a brief update on the state's response to this pandemic. Then General Matt Quinn, the Executive Director of the state's COVID-19 Task Force, and Todd, President and CEO of the Montana Chamber of Commerce, will provide their perspective about what our state has confronted and come through this last year. And there's no mistaking it. This last year has brought real, serious challenges and many dark days. Since the first case nearly a year ago, Montana has seen over 100,000 cases. Tragically, nearly 1,400 Montanans have lost their lives. With heavy hearts, Susan and I join all Montanans in keeping the family and friends of those we've lost in our prayers. Since that first case nearly a year ago, there are countless Montanans who have confronted underreported impacts of this pandemic: increased isolation, depression, and anxiety, increased cases of suicide, increased cases of drug use and abuse, increased food insecurity, increased cases of domestic violence and child abuse. Since that first case nearly a year ago, teachers and parents have had to make difficult decisions between in-person and remote learning. Many of our schools, including schools in Yellowstone County School District that I visited last week, made the courageous and brave decision to keep their classrooms open for in-person instruction 5 days a week. I applaud them and the Montana students and their families because they're better off. Kids are learning and parents are back to work. Since that first case nearly a year ago, more than 200,000 Montanans have filed for initial unemployment claims. And since that first case nearly a year ago, thousands of Montana businesses have closed, many for good. Too many Montana small business owners, men and women, who have invested their savings, their energy, and their lives, saw what they built disappear. And too many small business owners who didn't have to close their doors struggled to keep their customers in the door, pay their bills, and make payroll. But through it all, we've seen the resiliency of Montanans. As has been the case for several weeks, we're making encouraging progress in Montana combating this pandemic. Our trend lines remain promising. For the fourth straight week, we are averaging less than 200 cases per day. Over the last 7 days, we've averaged only 130 cases per day. And today, there are only 951 cases active in Montana. The last time we were below 1,000 active cases was July 13th. And there's more good news. As of today, 39 of our 56 counties have had cases in the single digits. Of those 39 counties, 16 counties now have 0 cases of COVID-19. This is great news. Communities are responding to the progress that is being made and making the right decisions for their citizens in response. We saw yesterday, Lewis and Clark County lifted all COVID-19 restrictions except the mask mandate. Hospitalizations continue to decrease. Over the last 7 days, we've averaged 70 hospitalizations statewide due to COVID-19. This is the lowest weekly hospitalization average since late July. While this is good news, 53 Montanans today are still hospitalized for COVID-19. For those Montanans battling the virus from a hospital, we will continue to pray for your health and full recovery. When I took office a little more than 2 months ago, we had an unyielding commitment to protect the most vulnerable Montanans, and this has driven our response to this pandemic. And we are making progress. This week, our state moved into phase 1B+. Montanans 60 years of age and up, and Montanans 16 and older with underlying health conditions. Our family members, friends, and neighbors most at risk from severe complications and death from the virus are now eligible to receive the vaccine. This approach is saving lives and minimizing hospitalizations. Data bear this out. As quickly as vaccine is arriving in the state, we're getting it to the most vulnerable. To date, the state has administered more than 345,000 doses. More than 132,000 Montanans are now fully immunized against COVID-19. This is more than 15% of our eligible population. Next week, Montana is set to receive more than 25,000 new doses and more than 23,000 second doses. And when it's my turn, I'm going to get the vaccine. I will choose to get it. And I encourage Montanans to receive these safe and effective vaccines as soon as their turn comes up. Getting a vaccine will help us stop the spread of this virus. Getting one will help us get back to a normal life. And getting one will help us put this public health and economic crisis fully behind us, something we can all look forward to. Before I turn it over to General Quinn and Todd O'Hare to speak about the public health and economic impacts of this pandemic over the last year, I want to thank some folks. I want to thank you to all Montanans whose resiliency has shown through during these our darkest days of the pandemic. Over the last year, you have stepped up for your family, friends, and neighbors. On behalf of a grateful state, I'd like to thank our doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals. This past year has demanded your expertise, leadership, effort, and time. You've exhausted yourselves as you've cared for others. You've been on the front lines. You've tended to the suffering. You've held the hands of Montanans who we've lost in this pandemic. And I'd like to thank our volunteers, including retired doctors and nurses who have stepped up to administer doses, conduct tests, contact trace over this last year. Thank you for your continued dedication and for the work that you do. Everyone in this room and across Montana should give them a strong round of applause and our thanks. And when we see them, take a minute to say thank you. In Montana, neighbors help neighbors. It's what we do, and it's what we've done during this difficult year. While the light at the end of the tunnel continues to get brighter, our Montana resiliency shines even brighter. With that, I'll turn it over to General Quinn to provide an update on the state's response over this last year.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon. Over the course of the past year, we have lost, as Governor mentioned, nearly 1,400 Montanans to COVID-related deaths. Those were Montana mothers, fathers, grandparents, sons, and daughters. We have seen over 100,000 Montanans fall ill to COVID-19, some with minor conditions, others hospitalized. It has taken a year for Montana to reach those unfortunate and sad numbers, and we grieve for each one and their families. But throughout this past year, Shining Stars have continued to care for fellow Montanans. Incredibly dedicated public health personnel and frontline medical workers at the state and at the local level have been in the trenches to keep Montanans healthy. You may not agree with all the decisions they've made, many decisions I've been a part of, but I assure you, those decisions were not made out of malice, a desire for power, or self-serving attitudes. Quite the opposite. Those decisions were selflessly made to try to protect each and every one of our fellow Montanans. Personally, I am proud of the efforts of our public health and medical communities and glad I had the opportunity to serve alongside of them. When we stood up the task force in early March of 2020, our focus was on three areas: policies, supplies, and personnel resources. Policies were naturally at the governor level, as they should be with input from public health teams. Supply shortages range from personnel protective equipment, PPE, for medical and support personnel across Montana, as well as critical testing supplies in our state lab. We started with a deficit of supplies both here in Montana and nationwide, yet dedicated individuals working in public health, as well as our disaster and emergency services departments, work day in and day out to get testing and PPE supplies for all of Montana. Additionally, the task force had to locate and provide replacement personnel for our medical and long-term care facilities whose staff were out with COVID or were in quarantine due to exposure. Volunteers from across Montana came out of retirement to assist, as did the outstanding women and men of our Montana National Guard, providing relief for our frontline medical workers across this state. It's been a long road, and before December, there was no clear solution for reducing COVID in Montana. Yet in the course of 2.5 months, we have administered 345,144 COVID vaccines with nearly 133,000 Montanans fully vaccinated. These vaccinations are the light at the end of the tunnel, a light getting significantly brighter, as Governor Gianforte likes to say, and he's right. Vaccines are the path out of COVID-19 world we've been living the past year. I encourage all Montanans to help us reach the tunnel end by getting your vaccine to protect yourself and your fellow Montanans. Let's get back to the fully open Montana we all know and love. Thanks again, Governor, for your leadership as we move Montana closer to that bright end of the COVID tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you, General Quinn. And now I'll turn it over to Todd O'Hare from the Montana Chamber of Commerce for his perspective.
Thank you, Governor Gianforte, for this opportunity. My name's Todd O'Hare. I'm the President and CEO of the Montana Chamber of Commerce. The Montana Chamber of Commerce is Montana's largest statewide business advocacy organization, and we represent sole proprietors, small and mid-sized manufacturers, and publicly traded companies that do business in Montana. So it's a diverse set of businesses that we represent. And I'm regularly asked how Montana businesses are doing, how they're coping and surviving through the COVID pandemic. And I can tell you that it's a bit of a mixed bag at best. Certainly, we've seen businesses that have closed their doors. Some will not reopen. Some were not able to survive the initial shock of the complete lockdown that we saw in the state, or the ensuing months of economic downturn that was a result of both their employees and their customers having to change their daily routines and their habits. Some of those businesses will not reopen, and there are probably some businesses yet that have yet to fully recognize the full economic impact to their business and their way of life. But there is some cause for some celebration and hope, some real optimism. The entrepreneurial spirit of Montana and the business community rose to the top last year as we saw businesses evolve and adapt and come to the rescue in a lot of cases. Distilleries switched to manufacturing hand sanitizers. We saw small and mid-sized manufacturing companies switch to making personal protective equipment, all of which were in a global short supply. We saw businesses adapt quickly to protect their employees and their customers by installing plexiglass protective equipment in their offices and in their businesses, coming up with novel approaches to protect their employees and their customers and interact with them. And all of this happened at an incredible speed of time in unprecedented conditions in a time when there was so much uncertainty. And so I think our Montana business community should be applauded for the great work that they did in protecting their employees and their customers. And locally too, Montanans did a good faith effort to try to shop locally and engage their local businesses in these unprecedented times. It's important that as we go forward that we continue to not only take efforts to protect our health from COVID, but also to be diligent and conscious about where we purchase our goods and shop locally whenever possible, support those businesses that have long supported our communities through sponsorships of local sporting teams and high schools and 4-H and FFA events. It's important that we continue to remember them as we come out of this COVID pandemic. Going forward, I can tell you that there is a high level of what I would consider cautious optimism, a bit of a pent-up demand, if you will, about the Montana economy. We're hearing stories of unprecedented inquiries into hotel accommodations, excursions, fishing guides, hunting outfitters are starting to report that they're booking up well into the fall already. So there's a tremendous amount of optimism on that sort of a front as we come forward. And so we're hopeful that as we continue to emerge from this, that we'll continue to see some of this growth. The other thing that has happened in Montana that we've not experienced before is that with the widespread acceptance of remote working, has opened Montana up to a whole new economy, where we have entrepreneurs moving to Montana and other folks that can work remotely, not just coming to Montana to visit the state for a week or two, but actually moving here and opening up their opportunities in Montana. Let me finish by thanking Governor Gianforte for his leadership. And this is leadership that we've seen that started on his first day in office. The Montana Chamber of Commerce started hearing from businesses late last spring, early last summer about the concerns that liability may present to their business from COVID exposure in their business. It quickly became a number one issue in the business community, was a desire to find liability protection from COVID, protection from lawsuits. On Monday, January 4th, Greg Gianforte was sworn in as governor. And on the very next day, Governor Gianforte laid out a path for liability protection for businesses and asked the legislature to make COVID-19 liability protection a legislative priority. On February 10th, barely a month later, Senate Bill 65, which was led by Senator Steve Fitzpatrick out of Great Falls, was signed into law. The liability protection in this law is a tremendous boost of confidence to the business community. And I believe it builds a foundation for an economic recovery for the state of Montana. It's a law, quite frankly, we had hoped Congress would pass that would apply to every business in every state. Congress couldn't get it done, but we got it done here in Montana. Thank you, Governor Gianforte, for your leadership and for addressing a top priority in the business community.
Thank you, Todd and General Quinn. And with that, we'll open it up for your questions.
Governor Zach Kaplan, Montana right now. This question might be better suited to General Quinn, but I'll ask it to you. Just to clarify, is the state still on track to enter phase 1C of the vaccination process late March, early April?
Well, I think General Quinn can comment, but let me start by saying we're encouraged by the increasing number of doses we're receiving. And I'm hopeful that in the near future, anyone in the state that wants a vaccine is going to be able to get it. I don't know if you want to add something there, General Quinn.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know that I can add much to Governor Gianforte. Obviously, we just got into 1B+, started this past Monday. We're looking at that uptake across the counties and how they're progressing through 1B+, and we'll be making recommendations to Governor Gianforte as we continue going along to look at 1C and frankly getting to 2 for all Montanans.
And just to follow up on that, for either the governor or General Quinn, President Biden yesterday came out and said, or really in the last couple weeks has said, he hopes that all American adults can get the vaccine by the end of May. Based on the progress that we're seeing, do you feel, as being in charge of the state's response, that we're on pace to hit that milestone?
Again, I think looking at the vaccine supply that we get in, we're dependent upon the federal supply and increases to the federal supply. We're watching the uptake of Montanans, and so all of those will go towards whether or not we can get there or not. But as Governor Gianforte said, we're hopeful and very, very optimistic on the path that Montanans. And as soon as we get vaccines in the state, I'll tell you, our counties are getting them in the arms, and that helps us get there as well.
Next question. Jonathan?
Thank you, Governor. Jonathan Amberian, Montana Television Network. Governor, I saw that on social media, I believe yesterday, you were critical of the American Rescue Plan Act as it was put together. I know that Budget Director Almy was in an appropriations earlier this week, and he said that there could be up to $2.7 billion coming into the state of Montana from that bill. In light of that, what is your view on this money that's going to be coming into the state in light of the fact that you've been critical of how the bill as a whole was put together?
Yeah, I think this American Rescue Plan Act is fiscally irresponsible. A very small portion is directed towards COVID. The remainder is it's a progressive wish list of items. The money is coming into the state. It is the law of the land. We're going to make sure the money that comes to Montana is used in a way that benefits Montana's interests, making investments for the long term. We're still getting to the bottom of it, given that the law just passed the U.S. Congress this week. We don't expect specific rules out of the administration for months, and the legislature are the ones that have to appropriate this money, and we're coordinating with them on that.
Thank you.
Next question in the room, yeah.
Yeah, hi, this is Aaron Kimball-Sannett with the Daily Montanan, here in place of Keith Schubert, our usual. I have a question about SB 159, the income tax cut. We saw an amendment in the committee today deepening the cut by another 0.25%. The amendment sponsor said that she cleared this with you. What was sort of the degree of responsibility that you had for this change to the bill's language?
So I promised Montanans they're going to be able to keep more fruits of their labor. These bills go through a circuitous process in the legislature. We proposed a cut from 6.9 to 6.75, and I'm going to consider bills that get to my desk. The parameters are very simple. We can't cut essential services. We need to balance the budget, and within those parameters, we want to let Montanans keep as much of the fruits of their labor.
Do you think that more than doubling the cost potentially of the cuts, which I believe this amendment would do, is the fiscally responsible path?
We'll have to see what gets to my desk, and we'll consider that in light of the other bills that make it to my desk and other spending bills and other tax relief. So we'll take a question online.
Hi, Governor Gianforte. This is Rachel Kramer with Yellowstone Public Radio. I was curious if you have any updates on the number of counties that have moved past the vaccinating the 1B phase people who qualify, and if you have any update on how counties are doing moving through phase 1B+.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. I don't have the specific data, but General Quinn can address that.
So thank you. We will, again, we just started 1B+ this past Monday. We will do another survey of all counties next week and see where they are. We have had some counties that said, hey, we're good on vaccine supply this week. So I think that's indicative of their progress getting through 1B and 1B+. Again, we'll survey next week and see where they are. One of the counties that we were watching was Missoula County, and they just announced they're moving into 1B+ here this week and early next week. So I think that's a good sign, again, as to the progress of vaccinations in Montana.
Jackie?
Governor, per a comment you made earlier about the legislature allocating stimulus funds, there have been a number of bills this session diluting the power of your office in responding to disasters like the COVID-19 pandemic. Does this frustrate you to see more of that power moved out of your office? Is this the right move for the legislature to be making?
You know, we're tracking some of these bills. We'll see what ends up on my desk. There are reasonable concerns with the balance of power between the executive branch and the legislature. There are reforms that we would support, and I'm going to wait until we see the final bills that get to our desk. We have another online question.
Hi, Governor Gianforte. This is Melissa Loveridge with the Bozeman Daily Chronicle. I apologize if this question has already been answered and I missed it, but given what's happening on the federal level, do you plan to expand the state's vaccine distribution eligibility to include teachers and other education workers?
Okay, so thank you, Melissa. Teachers who had underlying health conditions have been getting vaccinated all along. With this new directive, teachers are getting vaccines in Montana. Our focus will continue to be on getting vaccines to the most vulnerable, and I'm pleased with the progress that we're making. Is there another question in the room here? Anybody didn't ask a question? Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Again, Arn with Daily Montanan. This week, your Lieutenant Governor testified in support of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, a policy that a few years back you had said that you didn't believe was necessary. I'm curious why your position changed and kind of what informed that decision.
Yeah, I think this bill is consistent with our First Amendment rights of freedom of religion. Again, we'll look forward to seeing that bill come to our desk.
Did you not believe that before in 2016?
You know, the First Amendment's very clear that people have freedom of belief, freedom of religion, and it's unfortunate that we need a bill like this, given our Constitution is so clear. Is there any more questions online? One more. Okay, great.
Hi, Governor Gianforte. This is Maritza Giorgio with NBC Montana. I'm wondering about variants, if there are any new confirmed cases in the state. And I'm also wondering if you can walk us through why the state didn't release that information to all media outlets at once in the form of a press release when those cases were confirmed.
Okay. General Quinn, do you?
So I'm not sure about the part about not releasing to all media outlets. Obviously, as COVID has progressed, we try to release information to all county health departments first. That's who is most directly affecting the positive health of Montanans. I do understand that there may be 2 additional cases that have been identified. Those were being confirmed as we go, but and I believe those are the same variant that we saw previously, the UK variant. But otherwise, Maritza, I'm not aware of any others.
And I would just say we're keeping a close eye on these variants, but really the macro trends are the ones that are most important to us. New infections, hospitalizations, and we're just pleased to share the news with you today that, again, 39 counties, single digits, 16 counties now with no cases at all. This is real progress, and we're encouraged. So thank you for being here today.